Your steak is poison. That was the first line he read. A billionaire, a man who thought he'd seen every form of betrayal, sat frozen in a leather chair worth more than most people's monthly salary. But nothing had prepared him for those 4 words, handwritten on a folded napkin, slipped silently under his hand by a waitress who wasn't even supposed to look him in the eye. Julian Vance wasn't just any man. He was power wrapped in tailored suits, the kind of CEO who could snap his fingers and ruin entire economies. That night, he sat at the center table of Le Nocturne, a place where every chandelier dripped wealth and every glass of wine cost more than rent. It was supposed to be a victory dinner, a deal sealed, rivals crushed, empire expanded. But when he unfolded the napkin, all the noise around him, the clinking cutlery, the quiet music, the fake laughter of investors, evaporated. His hand stiff in midair, fork still hovering over his plate. The note was simple. The handwriting rushed, tilted, almost trembling. They don't want you leaving alive. Kitchen staff called you the N-word. Your steak is poisoned. Don't eat. Julian's throat tightened. For a man known for his composure, he suddenly felt exposed, stripped down to something fragile. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. His eyes flicked up and met hers. The waitress, dark brown skin, braided hair pinned tight, uniform too neat to hide how tired she was. She didn't look afraid of him. She looked afraid for him. And in that split second, he knew she wasn't lying. Julian leaned back slowly, every muscle rehearsing the art of indifference. No sudden movements. No panic. His board members and foreign partners sat around him, sipping wine, bragging about numbers on screens, never noticing the storm swelling in his chest. But inside, he was replaying every detail. The way the head chef had greeted him with too much smile, too much charm. The way the steak had arrived almost too quickly for a crowded night. The way the waitress's hand had brushed the edge of the plate, hesitating, as if she wanted to stop it right there. He forced himself to laugh at a bad joke from across the table. But the steak sat untouched, bleeding on the plate like a silent dare. Julian needed answers, and fast, when the waitress circled back to pour wine. He caught her wrist lightly, an action so subtle the others barely noticed. His voice dropped, low enough to vanish under the piano music. What did you see? Her eyes flicked left, then right. For a second, she looked like she might crumble, but then her jaw set firm. I heard them. The kitchen staff. They were mocking you, calling you names. Said no one like you deserves to eat here. One of them, he poured something on your food. Julian's stomach turned cold. Why are you telling me this? Because dignity matters, she whispered. And they don't think you'll make it out of here. He released her wrist. She walked away like nothing happened. But her words burned hotter than the candles on the table. Julian was no stranger to enemies. Competitors, rivals, even supposed allies. All wanted a piece of him. But poisoned food? In public? That was brazen. He watched the men around him dig into their meals, knives scraping, wine glasses clinking, their voices blurred into a cruel theater of normalcy. He thought of his family name, of the legacy he was building, of the sheer audacity of someone deciding he didn't belong here. He glanced back at the steak. For a moment, he considered pushing the plate away, but that would spark suspicion. A billionaire refusing food at his own victory dinner? It would draw more eyes than the poison itself. So he forced his hand steady, slicing into the meat. But he didn't raise it to his mouth. Not yet. Instead, he pressed his tongue against the inside of his cheek, a tell only he knew. He was thinking, calculating. And when Julian calculated, empires shifted. The solution came fast, ruthless, and sharp. Julian set his fork down deliberately. Then, in a tone too casual to challenge, he flagged the head chef over. This is undercooked, he said, nudging the plate forward. Why don't you taste it for me? The table chuckled. Just a playful jab. They thought, a rich man poking fun at his kitchen. Nothing more. But the chef's face blanched. His practiced smile cracked at the edges. For a moment, the mask slipped, and Julian saw the truth. The waitress hadn't lied. A hush rippled across the table. The investors exchanged puzzled glances. The chef stammered excuses about kitchen standards, But Julian never looked away. He had built his fortune reading men under pressure, and this man was drowning. Finally, the chef muttered something about needing to prepare another dish. He whisked the plate away, too fast, too desperate. Julian's hands curled into fists beneath the table. He wanted to stand, to confront, to demand answers now. But he stayed seated. That's what predators expected: rage, noise, attention. Instead, Julian chose patience, because patience was deadlier than poison. When the waitress returned, she set down a fresh glass of water beside him. Her hand lingered just long enough to slip another folded napkin beneath. This time, the message was shorter. They know I warned you. They're watching me now. Please be careful. Julian's chest tightened. The waitress hadn't just risked her job. She had risked her life. And in that moment, Julian Vance made a silent promise. If he survived this night, so would she. But survival would not come quietly, because in this war, silence had already been broken. The chandelier light glared down like interrogation lamps, casting long shadows across polished silverware. Julian Vance sat still, eyes on his glass of water, while inside his mind, a storm brewed. The waitress's second note, "They know I warned you," weighed heavier than the first. This wasn't just about a poisoned meal anymore. This was war, a public one, a trap set right in front of men who shook his hand by day and sharpened knives by night. And now, an innocent woman had been dragged into it. The silent decision. Julian had built empires on a single truth. Power wasn't loud. Power was quiet, calculated. So, instead of tipping the table and calling for guards, he leaned back, smiled, and raised his glass as if nothing were wrong. But beneath that calm surface, he was already rewriting the night. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth, "to partnerships that endure longer than our appetites." Glasses clinked. Toast rang. But Julian's food remained untouched, his knife gliding across his plate only to mask suspicion. The chef didn't return. That told him everything. Behind closed doors. The dinner dragged, but Julian's mind sharpened with every passing second. When dessert arrived, one he also refused to touch, he excused himself with a polished smile. His guests thought nothing of it. They had already swallowed their fill of wine and arrogance. But Julian didn't head to the restroom. He followed the corridor past velvet curtains, through swinging doors, into the heat and chaos of the kitchen. And there she was, the waitress, cornered, two cooks flanking her, voices low and sharp, their posture like wolves circling prey. "You think he won't find out?" one hissed. "You've ruined everything." The other spat. Her chin trembled, but her back stayed straight. "I'd rather lose my job than watch you murder someone." Julian's presence hit them like a slammed door. The cooks froze, faces draining of color as they realized the billionaire had just walked into their conspiracy. The unmasking. Julian's voice was calm, deadly calm. "Which one of you touched my food?" Neither spoke. The kitchen air grew heavy, thick with the hiss of frying pans and the weight of unspoken fear. Julian stepped closer. "Do you know what's worse than being caught trying to poison a man like me?" The taller cook swallowed. "W what?" Julian's eyes burned. "Failing." The word cracked like a whip. The waitress flinched. The cooks cowered. And finally one broke. The smaller of the two. "It wasn't us. We were told to. Paid to. It came from higher up." Julian's jaw clenched. Higher up, it wasn't random. It was orchestrated. The name revealed. "Who?" Julian demanded. The cook stammered, eyes darting between the floor and the billionaire's gaze. "A man said he worked with your partners, gave us money, promised protection if anything went wrong." The waitress gasped. Julian didn't blink. "His name." Silence. Then, barely audible, "Harlan Dorsey." Julian's blood iced over. Harlan, his so-called ally, a board member who had toasted him an hour earlier, a man who smiled in his face, signed contract with his pen, and now try to end him with poison, loyalty in the fire. The cooks scrambled, begging forgiveness, blaming fear and desperation. Julian barely heard them. His attention was on the waitress. the only person in the room who had chosen truth over silence. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Layla." "Layla," he repeated, as if memorizing it. "You saved my life tonight." Her eyes widened. "I just did what was right." Julian nodded once. Then he turned back to the cooks. His voice dropped to steel. "Get out. Now, before I decide whether prison suits you." They scattered, vanishing into the night like rats fleeing fire. The return to the table. Julian straightened his jacket, his mask of composure snapping back into place. "Stay close," he told Layla. "From now on, you don't leave my side." When they re-entered the dining hall, the investors barely noticed, but Harlan did. His eyes flicked up briefly, and in that instant, Julian saw the truth. The note of panic, the flicker of recognition. The predator had been unmasked. Julian didn't expose him there. Not yet. That would have been easy. Too easy. No. Julian preferred a slower execution. One that gutted not just a man, but his entire foundation. The reckoning. 2 days later, headlines exploded. Board member arrested in attempted murder plot. Restaurant staff confess. Poisoned meal meant for CEO. Julian Vance survives assassination attempt. The investigation unfolded like dominoes. Every testimony, every bank transfer, every frightened cook pointing back to Harlan Dorsey. But the part the headlines didn't cover was what happened in private. Julian met Harlan one last time, behind prison glass. The traitor's face was pale, drained of its smug arrogance. "You should have finished me," Julian said, voice steady. "Because now, I'll finish everything you built." And with that, Harlan's empire crumbled. Contracts dissolved. Investors fled. His name became poison itself. Layla's fate. As for Layla, she never returned to serving tables. Julian made sure of that. The woman who had risked her life for a stranger found herself with a new position. Personal aid to the very man she saved. No more carrying plates for arrogant guests. Now, she carried influence, protection, respect. When people asked why a billionaire would entrust so much to a former waitress, Julian's answer was simple. Because in a room full of liars, she was the only one who told the truth. Final reflection. That night at Le Nocturne wasn't about steak. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about dignity. About one woman who refused to let hate destroy a man's life. And about one man who learned that even in the highest towers of power, survival often comes down to a single choice. Whether to trust the quiet voice that dares to warn you, even when the world tells her to stay silent. Julian Vance trusted, and it saved him.